Hi, my name is Annalisa Hultberg, and I'm a statewide extension educator for the University of Minnesota in on-farm food safety and good agricultural practices. Today, we'll be talking about food safety for produce, especially when selling to farm-to-school markets. So good agricultural practices, very briefly, are those things that farms do to protect food safety when growing fresh fruits and vegetables. So GAPs are those things that we do on farm to reduce the potential for those microbiological, chemical, and physical hazards to get onto our fresh produce and to keep our customers safe. This is especially important when we are serving more vulnerable eaters, such as children, the elderly, or others that are immune compromised, such as those that might be sick. Small amounts of pathogenic organisms, such as certain types of E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, if that gets onto the fresh produce and it is consumed, even very small amounts of these organisms can cause illness in our customers. So keeping the poop from humans and the animals, which is the origin of those pathogenic organisms, off of our food is really our goal and what we do with good agricultural practices. It's really creating the conditions on the farm to reduce the potential for that contamination to occur. To be clear, when we're selling our produce to buyers such as schools, restaurants, others, we don't have to have any sort of a license to do that as long as that product was grown by us 100%. So we don't have any off-farm ingredients in that product. That is called a product of our farm. You also are not required to have a GAP audit. So a GAP audit we'll talk about a little bit more. So a GAP audit is something that a buyer can ask for, like a school, but they don't have to. It is not a law that they ask for that. What it is you use good agricultural practices in your farm. You contact someone such as the State Department of Agriculture. They come out, they perform an annual audit on your produce. They watch you harvest it. They review your records. You pay for that audit. And it's going to be anywhere from maybe $400 up to $1,000, somewhere in that range. And a 75% cost share is available to farms within Minnesota for 3 years for the cost of that audit. Only a handful of diversified farms in Minnesota do have an audit. More are getting it because market demand is increasing for this. But just to be clear, you don't have to have it. But if a buyer that you want to sell to does require a GAP audit, that is okay, and we can help you get that. You develop your food safety plan, you learn about good agricultural practices, and then you can go ahead and get that annual audit. But if you don't have the audit and the buyer doesn't require it, you still should you should use good food safety practices, and then there are other ways to document it so you can show that to your buyer. You can provide a written food safety plan. We have a template, so you do not have to start from scratch. You should get your well water tested. If you're using well water, you should test it annually, and you can provide that report to your customer. Just have a conversation with the school food service. They really care about food safety because they're serving children. A lot of our food buyers in a food service have undergone ServSafe training. They understand food safety in a food service environment. And so it's your job to tell them a little bit about what you do in an on-farm environment for food safety as well. You can have them come out and visit the farm if both of you wanted to do that. And importantly, get some training yourself. That could be online, that could be in person, that can be from other farmers, but there are a lot of resources out there that our state and many other states have created for fruit and vegetable farmers. So really educating yourself about some of those practices and where you could potentially make some improvements is important. So we will do a very short, brief overview about some of those good agricultural practices in this session, but know that this is not a GAPS training and we will go into much more depth. But this is just a little teaser. So always having adequate hand washing available for all of your workers or all of your volunteers. Anybody who's working with your fresh fruits and vegetables should wash their hands before they start to handle that. So making sure that those are available and stocked, making sure that there's bathrooms to use, and not working when you're ill is another great way to really reduce the potential for those pathogenic organisms that can come from sick workers to get onto that produce. You can have a portable hand washing stand like this, and it's on the back of a truck, and so it can get out to the field. If the field is a distance from the house, you might not want to go back to the house. Having one next to any porta potty is really important. This is just a simple one on a table, and we have instructions on how to build that. Soap and water is the best way to wash your hands. Sanitizer is not a replacement for adequate hand washing. So when we're on the farm, our hands are dirty, there's soil on them, and that sanitizer just doesn't work. So making sure we're using soap and water. Water is used for irrigation. It's also used for washing our vegetables and washing our food contact surfaces and other surfaces on the farm. So making sure that that water is tested annually. If you've got well water, you can get that tested. It's maybe $30 to $40 for a test. And we have lots of resources that can send you to those labs to get those conducted. And making sure that when you're washing the vegetables, that is potable water. Compost, manure-based compost is really great for our soil and our plants, but it can contain pathogenic organisms. So if we have it on farm, making sure to store it in a way where it doesn't contaminate the vegetables. And if it is a raw, untreated product, meaning someone cleared out their barn, or you got it from a friend who's just kind of stored it for a few years and it hasn't gone through a scientifically validated treatment process where it has been turned and temped and records have been kept on it, you have to consider that product raw because it hasn't heated up fully and completely in all parts. So you should apply it in the fall, or at least 90 or 120 days before you will harvest the crops, which in Minnesota almost always means applying it in the fall. If it's a fully treated product that you purchase from a supplier that comes with a certificate of conformance, or you make it on farm and you follow those temperature processes that are laid out, then you can go ahead and apply that at any time. Safe harvest. So as we're harvesting, really looking at the product, making sure that there isn't signs of chewing or feces like that piece of bird poop on that tomato there. We would not want to harvest that tomato. It's important to remember that you can't fully wash off contamination once it occurs. So you might be able to wash it off and it looks visibly clean, but that contamination is really good at sticking onto the produce, and it can actually be internalized into the cells of the produce as well. So making sure that you're training your workers to do that, keeping animals away from the growing area as best that you can. If that's wildlife, putting up fencing and deterrence, training your domestic animals to stay out of the growing areas is a great idea. Our pack sheds can be open. They can be a fully enclosed with a poured floor, but doing our best to clean and sanitize those food contact surface. For example, those totes on the left have been cleaned and sanitized and then stored upside down so that they can dry. On the right, you can see everything is up off the ground, which is great to see. And having some sort of a plan for how often and how you will clean and sanitize those. When we're washing our actual vegetables, it's important to actually have a conversation with the customer. Do you want these things to be washed? How do you want it bunched? How do you want it washed? And how do you want it delivered? That's all part of that conversation. So for something like the beet, you can see they're spraying it off there on a spray table. So that's a really nice way. It's that single pass water. It's a really good, safe way because the water is just going straight down. The recirculated water is a little bit higher risk. Something like these greens are being washed in. That's okay because we can't spray greens. We do have to use a tank like that, but we're making sure to clean that tote first and really change that water as often as possible, and use a food grade sanitizer, which is meant for sanitizing fruit and vegetable water if possible. It's not a requirement, but we would talk a lot more about that in a GAPS class. So things that we would never wash are herbs, tomatoes, berries, many storage crops. These things should not be washed or they will break down in storage. Sometimes washed, you can see those items. Think about that. Are they dirty enough to wash? It really depends on the conditions on the farm. So that's a judgment that you would make and your buyer would make. But when possible, defer to not washing because it can, when things are washed, remember in that tank, there can be that cross contamination. So if possible, don't wash it. If it is dirty, it obviously does need to be washed. And some things do need to be cooled down, hydrocooled, to really get that field heat out. But again, changing that water frequently is a great way to reduce that risk, and using a sanitizer if possible. So that was a very brief overview. Know that most questions were not answered in that, and it wasn't intended to be. It was just kind of a teaser about the more information that we would be able to provide in a training. But know that local foods are very safe. Our farmers use great practices. It's legal for you to sell to a school. You don't need a special license to do that, as long as it is 100% of your own product and grown on farm. They don't have to require a gap audit, but they might. If you need that, come and ask for one, come and ask for some help, and we can help you get that. Really having a conversation about food safety is a great way to sell your product and show that you care. It's a part of professionalism and having a high quality product. Starting a food safety plan is an excellent thing to do. We have templates on our website that you can download and start, so you're not starting from scratch there. Training your workers on your policies and getting your water tested are other things that you can do. And make sure to reach out for help if you encounter questions. We do trainings throughout the winter primarily. We also do some summer trainings on farm, and we do them in many languages if you or your workers' English isn't their primary language. And we have lots of on-farm on our website. We have many resources as well. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to chatting more.